Nate, we're back. The offseason is basically officially over. This is your last weekend without NFL football for a very long time. We love to hear it. We do have college football kicking off as well. So while we're kind of waiting for everyone to trickle in, I know you're pumped about college football, and I know everyone's excited to get into this, talk some moves to make that we're trying to kind of flesh out our rosters, whatever the case is. But Nate, you're pumped about college football. I am as well. And I want to know, what is your cannot miss must see game of the week for college football? Has it happened already, or is it we're in the marquee matchups now? These are the games you really need to talk about as I choke on my own words as we're trying to get into this. But who's your matchup of the week in week one here of college football, the true first week of college football? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm getting really excited. I was watching College Game Day right before I jumped up here into my office to join the live stream. It was great watching Pat McAfee and Nick Saban together. That combo I never imagined ever on TV together, and they're literally sitting right next to each other. It's going to be great. I'm super excited about this college football season. Last week was week 0. We saw FSU lose to Georgia Tech. Last night got to see Deion Burks, my man at wide receiver. I'm planting my flag on that guy for Oklahoma. Deion Burks had 3 touchdowns last night. But the big game today for week 1, there's 2 big games. Game day is at Notre Dame, Texas A&M at College Station. That's obviously a pretty big game, 2 top 20 teams. But for me, I think the big game that I'm excited to watch is the one that's at noon, right after this live stream. And that's between Clemson and Georgia. It's a neutral site game technically because it's in Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but really we know that's a home game for Georgia, though Clemson's not too far away from Atlanta. So it should be split pretty well, but that's going to be a really fun game. Is Clemson still Clemson? Because they don't use the transfer portal. It seems like maybe they're falling behind a little bit, but also they got 2 5-star freshman wide receivers they just brought in. They got a ton of talent still on that team. So, is that gap between Clemson and Georgia there, or is there just a lot of top teams and really not that top tier anymore between Georgia and Ohio State and the other teams? So I'm excited. Just the fun of college football and seeing all these teams play, and then all the upsets that come with it, all the chaos that comes with college football. You get that a lot more than you do in the professional league.
Yeah, no, that would be my pick as well, the Clemson Georgia game. Not necessarily nearly as involved in college football as you are, but that's my game to watch. I have a lot of stock in the Clemson offense. I have in our C2C league, I have Cade Klubnik, I have Antonio Williams kicking around there as well, and I think I have someone else on that Clemson team.
Yeah,
I have
got
a lot
couple
of
players myself. Yeah.
So I have a lot of stake invested in that. And that's usually how I pick the games I watch. Same with NFL. If the Packers aren't playing, I'm usually going to defer to whatever team has the most fantasy players going. So that is where I'm at, and that is where we're at talking the start of college football. We got our first question from Thomas here. I've got Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta in a Dynasty tight end premium league. I could use a stud wide receiver, however. What to do? And for me, I tend to lean on where I think, let's talk about where the production with these 2 is going to be. Because I think Laporta is a safer bet to have more production, but I don't think Kincaid is going to be that far because you have to consider Laporta also very high producer last year, very high efficiencies with touchdowns and things like that, very high touchdown rate. So you expect that to roll back. Kincaid, very low touchdown rate, also going to be, the top target in that offense. Sam Laporta, as good as he is, he's the number 2 in a very good offense, a very high-end number 2, though. So I'd probably look to sell Laporta, not because I think he's going to produce less than Kincaid, but he's the higher value between the 2. And maybe you get to a nice, snazzy wide receiver that I'm sure Nate is looking up an option for. And maybe you can get a decent enough tight end kickback that's, in that tight end 2 range, something along those lines that can just give you some depth behind Kincaid, assuming you have no other tight ends, I guess. If you have plenty of other tight ends, probably not that necessary. Nate, what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, so looking at some values and looking at recent trades on Dynasty Daddy, I would also move Laporta because he's just, tight end 1 in most Dynasty ranks, so you're going to get a bit more value for him. And he's up there with some really, really good stud wide receivers. So this is a good option if you want to go get that stud wide receiver. I'm totally fine keeping Kincaid. I think production between these 2 is really, just splitting hairs. So go with the guy who's a little bit less valued. Move Laporta. I'm seeing trades, straight up Malik Neighbors, straight up AJ Brown. That's where Laporta is ranked. I don't know if you can actually make that happen in your league, but his value is that high. If I need to add, a pick to go get a Malik Neighbors, to go get an AJ Brown and really solidify my team, I don't mind even adding up to a second round pick. You might be able to add a second and get a third back, just because you just can play the value card there. But you can definitely move Sam Laporta for a really good wide receiver right now. If you need a tight end back, maybe you ask for a throw-in tight end, maybe like a Cade Otton. He's one of the guys
Sure.
that I brought under moves to make, just because I think he's a really cheap tight end. During the main section of the schedule last year, like the middle part of the schedule last year, Cade Otton was averaging 10, 12 points a game. Not really hitting those highs that we want the other tight ends to hit, but this is a solid bye week fill-in, Cade Otton, that you can get really cheap. I mean, his value is like a third, a late third even, if it's not tight end premium. So definitely a guy you can just throw in. So maybe you can move Laporta and a third, or Laporta and a second for Neighbors and Cade Otton or something like that. I think that'd be a great move to make for this team.
Yep, that was 100% my suggestion. Instead of as trying to get, some of their pick compensation back, like you were saying with send this to get that, trying to lump in whatever, because you figure you're giving them a top tier tight end. They probably need one less tight end on their roster, unless they're like you have no other tight ends kicking around. So that is definitely the move I would make with that. Got another one here from David talking about the top 3 running backs in next year's draft class. Nate, this is right in your wheelhouse. Outside of it being running backs, this is definitely right in your wheelhouse. Do we have like a solid top 3? I know that the top of running backs is kind of congested, so it's kind of hard to talk right now. A lot is going to be determined by what they do this year, obviously, if they can stay healthy, and then draft capital, I think, is going to play, because it's so, and landing spot, because it's so congested, it's going to play a lot of a role with how these running backs land. But maybe what's your top 3? What are your early projections, I guess you could say, for the top 3-ish?
It is hard to make a top 3 out of this group right now. There's like a top 6 or so, top 7, which is great. We're not used to hearing that with the running back position, where there's so many players we're excited about. Usually it's like, well, we can maybe squeak 2 good running backs out of this class, but no, we got a bunch of good guys here. I'm actually just going to go ahead and, give more than a top 3. I'm going to give a top 5, because I can't really give a top 3 until we get more games going. Specifically because 2 of the top 3 would be the Ohio State running backs in Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Both these guys are very, very talented. Neither one is the RB1 for this Ohio State team. They are both 1A, 1B. They're just the same. Whatever the situation is, whatever the game plan is, Chip Kelly said, depending on the team that they're playing, whichever running back fits best against that style, or whoever has a hot hand, that's who's going to get it. It's going to be back and forth all year. These guys are both going to go over for 1,000 yards. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But then 3 other guys I wanted to mention. Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. This guy was, a Heisman contender last year, led the nation in rushing. This guy is the real deal for Oklahoma State, and they have a pretty good team this year with lots of returning production, so I expect him to have another really good year. Marion Hampton for North Carolina had a really good night last night, ran for over 100 yards. A lot of those yards coming after contact. This guy is really hard to take down. And then last but certainly not least, one guy I absolutely love and absolutely the best receiving back in this class, Aston Jeanty. Yes, that's the guy, man, for Boise State. Some people might say he's a little undersized, coming at 5'9", maybe 5'8" at the end of the day. But he's like 215 pounds. He's got the size that he needs, and he is elusive. He is fast. And like I said, there is no better receiving back in this draft class than him.
Yeah. My only criticism of Aston Jeanty, and you will hear it, I have 2 actually, but you'll hear it throughout the entire process, because in my looking through my production gradings, which is something I talked big about in this last draft cycle, the big thing against him is strength of schedule ranking, very low in that. And when running backs pop off against low strength of schedule, they do have the tendency to, or at least have the higher likelihood to still be viable at the NFL level. But when they face not awesome strength of schedule over the course of the season, I know he has record of like good games against good teams too, but it's just one little red flag. And then the size, as you mentioned too. But the nice thing, go ahead.
Some nice things regarding that we'll get to see this year is September 7th. Schedule. So next week we'll get to see him against Oregon. Boise State's gonna be playing Oregon, so we'll get to see that. It's probably not going to go very well overall for Boise State, but we'll see that. Also, Boise State right now is considered one of the better group of 5 teams. They're actually the favorite to make the playoffs out of all the group of 5 teams. So if Boise State wins their conference, they make the playoffs. We'll get to see him in the playoffs against some better competition as well.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is he has incredible production, and that is like out of the running backs I've seen that have poor strength of schedule gradings and things of that sort, the running backs that ascend past that, buck that trend, they have boatloads of production to go along with it. So I'll say it's all on the table, but hey, we have to take in everything. We can't just take in the things we like. We have to take everything into consideration. And you bring up Oregon. They're not even ranked right now. They're not even a top 25 team as far as I can see per this schedule. It says right here. It says right here that they're not ranked, but okay, good. That I'm glad my Duckies have some respect on them, because on this right here it says that they don't. So get your poop together, Google schedules, which maybe go look at a better scheduling site.
Yeah. Maybe don't look at Google.
But, yeah, I'll take the L there. That's fine. Getting back on track here that little bit. Got a nice chunk of question. This one's a quickie. How much waiver wire fab should I use on Jordan Whittington? Have all 100 to use, deep rebuild. The big question is here, if has he been sitting on the waivers this whole time and you haven't had access to him, or did you just have your draft? He made it through the draft somehow. Maybe it was a 3-round draft or something. And now we have to buy, because if he's been sitting out there this whole time, I'm throwing $3.
I was thinking 3 just to make sure you get it.
If this is your first time having access to him because your waivers just opened up, whatever the case is, I know some leagues kind of play that game where they have very specific free agency windows.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, I'd probably be in that 11 to 12 range if this is your first shot at getting him. But if he's been sitting out there, I don't think you need to go too crazy. I like the idea of going to get him though, but I always think of, never bid on even dollar amounts, never bid on a 5, never bid on a 10, 5 or 10. Just because that's what people, $5. And so what I always do is I think, okay, about how many teams do I think are going to be interested in this player? I think it should be around $5 bid. I think there's going to be 2 teams interested. So I go up to $8 just to quick Bob math, I guess you could say, for that one. It's a scary thing to be up in that head of mine, but we got Vince chiming in here. Deep league, 3 wide receivers, 3 flexes, need to start 2 in week 1. Pick 2 between Lad McConkey, Xavier Worthy, and Brian Thomas.
This is such a dynasty question. This is such a dynasty question because you're starting your rookie wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to deep league, so you got a lot of starting players here if you have 3 wide receivers and 3 flex. Yeah. But this is just, you still got good wide receivers. I'm not complaining about your wide receivers. They're very talented. But just something I want to bring up, because this is a great segue into it, is, we have this dynasty mentality all of season, and we get to the actual season, and we got to make sure that we have redraft producers, that we want to put in our lineup. I love Lad McConkey, obviously. I love Xavier Worthy. I love Brian Thomas Jr., all of these guys. But you know what? Tyler Lockett probably outscores all of these guys week 1. Just things like that. Get yourself in that mindset. Dynasty value does not equal fantasy production all the time. Now, I'm sorry to be dunking on Vince here, because he probably he's really excited about his wide receivers that he's got in his dynasty. He's starting these guys in his flex. He's probably has a pretty good core. But I just wanted to bring that up. We always want to make sure that we're having that redraft mentality as we get closer to the season about setting our lineups. That's why I'm going to talk about Gus later, because Gus Edwards is just breaking my brain, the value that he has right now. But out of these 3, I'd be starting Lad, because you don't have too many competition for targets there. And then probably Brian Thomas Jr. Xavier Worthy's out there, and I know the Hollywood Browns not playing, but they're playing the Ravens. It's a good defense. Xavier Worthy's been running a lot of deep routes, and Andy Reid even said he's kind of cautious about relying on Worthy early in the season. So I think there's going to be a lot of Rashee Rice, a lot of Travis Kelce, and any veterans they have there.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you on the concept of, having, if you're competitive, at least. If you're not super competitive, who cares, I guess. But and this is deep league, as you mentioned. Nate, you're dunking on the guy. This is wide receiver 5 and 6.
I know.
Chill out a little bit. I'm just kidding. I know where your head's at. I know where your heart's at. For me, it'd be Brian Thomas Jr. to start, and then I guess pick your poison, because Worthy obviously has the higher upside, but you mentioned Ravens have a very good defense. Lad McConkey, you have your question marks with the offense in general, that offensive scheming, etc. But targets wise, he's in the mix for the top target getter on that offense. So, I Brian Thomas Jr. for sure. A lot of question marks for him, for me, with his target usage this season because of who he has in front of him again. Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Gabe Davis is there. And as much as I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be better and ascend past him at some point, right now, Gabe Davis is going to get just annoying enough of a target share that you can't know when to start him or to sit him. And he's going to piss off Brian Thomas Jr. managers. And Travis Etienne's going to get plenty of work out of the backfield. So it's tough for Brian Thomas, but I don't think there's a lot of great answers here. I think you're maybe, I think there's more upside with Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. than there is with Ladd McConkey. So I'd probably go with those two in your 5th and 6th spot. I'd probably lean for more upside than McConkey, who probably has a better target share, but I think the ceiling is a little limited there. Before we get to Nate's first move to make, let's take one more question. Talking a trade here, moving Terry McLaurin and Jaden Reed, I'm assuming, for Kyron Williams. Currently have Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Rashee Rice, and T. Higgins. Running backs are Pacheco and Pollard. I love when we get alliteration out of the running back room. It is my favorite thing. I would make this deal, Nate. I don't know about you. Big Kyron fan. I like this value, too. I don't think it's a wildly off value. I think, you're paying a fringe late first, early second with Reed. McLaurin's a second-round pick for Kyron Williams, who gives you, in my opinion, in my projections that you can find at patreon.com/nice-rewind, a top 5 running back this season in Kyron Williams. So I'd make this deal. I'm about it, Nate. I'm more than happy to hear your side of it, though. What are you thinking? Do you need to adjust it at all?
Yeah, I'm not, I'd much rather go after a different running back. I'm not a huge Kyron fan. I'd rather go after like a Saquon Barkley, because Barkley is valued about the same as Kyron, and I have a bit more faith I understand Kyron's younger, but I have Barkley, I think Barkley's going to have a better year this year. I don't think it's controversial to think that Barkley's going to have a better year than Kyron, especially after Corum got drafted. But value-wise, I think you're right. Like, this is pretty solid. But really, if you want to elaborate on this question and elaborate on your answer, you got to answer Waffle's super chat here.
Yeah, I will. I'd love to. Okay, here we go.
You're the one that's going to be answering this question, not me.
It didn't let me click on it originally, but here we go. Please explain why everyone should still be in on Kyron Williams. Also, how confident are you in your projections? So many variables. If honestly, if I wasn't confident in my projections, I wouldn't pump them up. I've put in probably darn near 100 hours on these things. And this is ultimately my first go at these projections. I've never done in-depth, super hardcore projections, but I take into consideration coaching schemes, this, that, and the other thing, how offensive coordinators are using their players, how offensive head coaches are using their players, target usages, and things like that. I just don't consider Blake Corum to be that much of a threat. If Kyron Williams had produced like Dameon Pierce did last year, I would have more concerns, because with what Kyron did, efficiency-wise, raw production-wise, even though he was, out of the season for, missed 5 weeks, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks, still was a top 10 producer in several categories: missed tackles, forced, yardage, touchdowns, etc., carries. I'm not worried about Corum. That doesn't concern me. I think that's almost better for him to not make Kyron Williams carry the ball every single play. It doesn't have to be it's Kyron Williams or Ronnie Rivers. It's Kyron Williams or Blake Corum. They can both run the ball effectively. So I'm still in on Kyron. I like my projections. Top 5, I feel like, is probably about his ceiling. Obviously, you can't go much higher than top 5. So I'll give you that. But I think he's barring injury, and that's something you always have to say with players, even though it should be fact of the matter is. But barring injury, I think he's locked in for top 10 season, to say the least. And with these two, I take the numbers. I take the numbers that are given to me. I put them into a bunch of formulas. Thank you, Nate, for getting me onto sheets, because
like
I'm
an oracle. You take the what the gods are telling us, and then
exactly.
You tell us.
And here's the thing: I put all these numbers in, and I'm not miles off of consensus with a lot of these too. So that tells me I got to be doing something right. So yes, some players might be a little higher. There's some tweaks here and there, but If you haven't checked them out yet, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. In the gold tier, you can buy them straight up for $5. If you want to do that in the Patreon as well, just go to our page. You can buy the post that it's on. Excuse me. There. So I'm just still bigging on Kyron, man. I can't not. It, like I said, it'd be one thing for a day 3 running back if he did what Dameon Pierce did his rookie year, where he was not super efficient, left a lot to be desired. But Kyron Williams was a stud last year. And here's another big kicker. Scored over 20 points per game in PPR points per game scoring, excuse me. And when that happens, those running backs stick around. Those are your Saquon Barkleys, your Austin Eckler's, your Todd Gurley's, your this, that, the other thing. Top 5 running back we've talked about the last X years. Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott, plenty of other first-round running back picks. So I'm still in. Thomas is falling back. Try and offer Laporta for Andrews and Rome Odunze. Good God, if you could get this done, Nate. Oh, my Lanta. I'd love it. I temper expectations for Rome year 1, but pivoting to Andrews because everybody seems down on Andrews. I don't understand it. I don't.
Still
I
my
don't get
tight
it.
end 1 in Dynasty.
I
just think the production is going to be that good.
I don't know it,
years
man.
old. Still got like 5-6 years left.
He'll be 29 this year, in all fairness, but still, he's a tight end. He's not a running back. Yes, he's had some injuries here and there, but Andrews' production is just silliness. So 100%, if you can get that offer done or make that, start off with that, I feel like you probably have to add to the Laporta side a little bit, because Rome, it'd be different if people were valuing Rome as like a mid top 20 tight end, but he's mid-teens. He's in that wide receiver like 14 to 16 range for most people, which feels outlandish to me. Maybe this is a move you make later on in the year when people realize that Rome Odunze is the third target in this offense. Again, barring injury to Keenan Allen, of course. Yeah, if you can get this done, I'm all about it. And thank you for the super chats, Thomas and Waffle. There are going to be a lot of questions, and we cannot get to all of them, unfortunately. So if you'd like to support the channel, the brand, and us, you can drop a super chat down below and guarantee a response to your answer. But Nate, before we get to more questions, tell me about your first move to make here. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? I'm going to go through and pin some questions for us that I definitely want to answer. What do you got?
All right. Well, number 1 move to make before the season starts, if you're a contender, is to go out and get Gus Edwards. That is my number 1 move to make. He is still one of the best values right now, I think, in all of fantasy. I'm going to pull him up here and keep trade cut. Currently 174th overall and the RB 49, according to Keep Trade Cut. I get it. He's 29 years old, but that's really the only thing I think he has going against him. And he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear, to be honest, throughout his career. So he's now on the Chargers playing for Greg Roman, who he has a lot of history with because Greg Roman was the offense coordinator for the Ravens for many years. And he's under Jim Harbaugh, so another Harbaugh. But also we know exactly what kind of offense this is going to be. This is going to be the same offense we saw in Michigan. This is going to be the same offense we saw with the 49ers when Jim Harbaugh was there. This is going to be a ground and pound offense with a lot of play action where Justin Herbert can throw the ball deep, which means Gus Edwards is going to get 250 carries this year. He's going to get goal line touches. I know J.K. Dobbins is out there, and believe me, there's no bigger fan of J.K. Dobbins and his talent than me, but I've watched J.K. Dobbins for the last 4 or 5 years not really be on the field. And after all the injuries he's had, I don't have a lot of hope that he's going to just step out there and be a top running back in the NFL. I love when he came out of college, but at this point, he's got to be a different player than he was at that point. So Gus Edwards is there. This is a guy that had 13 touchdowns last year. At one point was leading the league in touchdowns, I think by week 10 or something like that. He's going to have this opportunity again. I think he's going to be a top 24 running back. I'm thinking RB 16 or something like that. I think he'll have a career high in receptions as well, because last year was a career high in receptions with 12. I expect him to get more than 12 this year. I'm not saying 50, but 20 maybe. Okay, 20 receptions would be huge for Gus. You add on another 13 touchdowns, 1,000 yards rushing, not too much more than that. 200 something rush attempts. You're going to get an RB 16 season, and you can get this guy right now for a 3rd round pick, a late 2nd, and maybe you get something back on top because no one is giving Gus his flowers when he deserves it. So I just don't understand the value right now on Gus. It's kind of upsetting me, obviously. So I've gone out and got him everywhere. On just about every single best ball team I have on both Underdog and DraftKings, I have Gus Edwards. On most of my rosters, I've traded for Gus Edwards. It seems like the most obvious pick. It's like kind of how Raheem Mostert is really undervalued right now by the Dynasty community, just because, he's 31 years old or whatever. But honestly, outside of the rookie running backs and second-year running backs, I'm not really looking at running backs outside of 1 year, maybe 2 years anyway. So these older running backs, if I can get them for a third-round pick and they're going to be a top 24 running back for me this year, that is absolutely worth it. Look at your third-round picks this year. Look at your third-round picks last year and the year before that. Maybe 10% of them actually work out to be someone that you were putting in your lineup consistently. So go get Gus with their third-round pick.
Yeah, I like it, Nate. If nothing else for the value, I don't have like sky high projections for the guy, but just kind of peeling the curtain back a little bit, and keep in mind with these projections, some of these guys, like I have Gus at running back 34. He's in tier 10, 11 points per game, between 11 and 12 points per game. I don't have him tagged for many receptions. That's his biggest knock. And if J.K. Dobbins, and this is with, kind of following the smoke that's been coming out of camp where J.K. Dobbins is the solid 2 there, it's going to be kind of a committee. If J.K. Dobbins falls short of that, because he's coming off a catastrophic injury and multiple in his career so far, there is a high likelihood that this does not happen. Gus Edwards could go a lot higher, but from the range you're kind of talking about, he's only a 1.5 behind. A couple of touchdowns put him up there. It's not like he's wildly off. I think he's a great value. And if nothing else, he's a great running back 3 for you that you can rely on. He has an awesome floor. You're not buying him to be a running back 1 or 2. And that's when, when I get miffed about players and their values sometimes, it's because you're buying them at a price to be a running back 1 or 2, but they're going to produce less than that. And I can't get behind that. If you want, hey, it's your team, do what you want with it. But I personally cannot get around that. Here we go. Here's some fun things to talk about, Nate. Waffle. Just going for the jugular with the Johan Dotson here. How did he blow it so bad? This one's tough. I mean, because we loved him as a prospect, but things have just not gone, how we would have liked, obviously. And I think this boils down to a little bit of how that. I don't think it's all on Dotson. I'll admit that. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a great get as a wide receiver 3 for the Eagles. I think they made an upgrade. I think they made a good NFL move. I don't think it's going to amount to jack squat for your fantasy rosters. But for Johan Dotson, I mean, you have injuries in year 1, which can stunt growth. You have a poor functioning offense, which stunts growth. If you're not being used properly, this, that, and the other thing. It would have been nice to see him with Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, this new regime, but they just decided, nah, well, he's so bad, we'll trade him to our division rival.
Yeah.
Which is just,
and they don't, it's not even like they have like a ton of wide receiver depth. Like I really don't, I don't know, because like the trade looks bad. It looks bad for Dotson. Like they got rid of him for not much,
right?
But like, not that he was the most efficient player, but he had a pretty good rookie season. Not incredible, but a good rookie season, good draft capital. His profile was pretty solid coming out of college. It wasn't, top 5, top 10 worthy, but I don't know where it went wrong. I don't know. And now it's pretty bad because wide receiver 3 on the Eagles, I don't think is going to be very productive for fantasy at all. So, he's a guy, he's actually my most rostered player. So this was really tough for me. I still haven't recovered yet. I'm probably going to drop him in a couple leagues at some point this season, but not yet. We'll see what happens. I'm sad.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sad.
Yeah, it was a rough drop off for Johan Dotson for me in my last projection update. He dropped 2 points per game in scoring. He is now sitting at wide receiver 96. Yeah. And that is because the Eagles, the third wide receiver on the Eagles, is the ugly stepchild of their offense. They throw to no one less than the wide receiver 3, other than the wide receiver 4, tight end 2, wide receiver 5, etc. But it's just not a good spot to be since A.J. Brown has come into that offense with Devonta Smith. If they didn't have Goddard, if they didn't have Saquon now in the backfield, who, albeit, we've seen them, or we saw DeAndre Swift take a hit to his receiving workload in the backfield too. So, and this is exactly it. This is exactly my point. Dotson is probably the fifth option in the offense.
Yep.
And I broke this down in a recent video, moves to make last week, I think. Just breaking down why he's going to be the fifth option, and he probably won't even scrape 60 targets this year. I actually think I have him for like 53 targets, which I felt was actually pretty high for him in that offense, considering the highest a wide receiver 3 has had in that offense in the last 2 years was Quez Watkins in 2022, where he had 52 targets, and that was in 20 games. So that was the full season. He had 52 targets. So I find it hard to believe that he'll hit that, but it's been rough for Johan Dotson. We won't.
Kellen Moore. The only thing going for Dotson is that it's Kellen Moore now, and it's a different offense. But I still don't love it. That's the only thing.
Would you like to know something about Kellen Moore, Nate?
Does he not use a third wide receiver a lot?
Because Zach brought this up too, and I quickly shut him down. He runs one of the most three wide receiver sets. Runs a lot of wide receiver.
There you go.
I'll learn how to talk. 3 wide receiver sets.
Runs a lot of 11 personnel. There you go. You can just say that.
There you go. Even better way to put it. Looking at the last 3 seasons, the target shares the wide receiver 3 has had under Kellen Moore. And this is an intended target share. So this is if the wide receiver 3 played out the whole season in case of injuries. This kind of extrapolates what it would be over the course of the season. So these numbers are inflated a little bit to what they are, the like true target share is 10% in 2023, 13% in 2022, 17% in 2021. So overall, that's 14%. That's about what Johan Dotson's average has been throughout his career so far. So I still don't expect much for Johan Dotson, unfortunately, in this offense. But who knows? It's better than not having it, I guess. And then we have another super chat. So 12-team Superflex start 9, Patrick Mahomes, Drake May, and Geno Smith. We have Saquon Barkley, Kyron Pacheco, Drake London, the Almighty, Tank Dell, JSN, Jaden Reed, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Ricky P. I love that. Please, we need to make that a nickname. And then Andrews at tight end. Thoughts for moves on this team? I mean, honestly, man, I'd like to make some moves in that wide receiver room a little bit just for longevity's sake, but for competing this year, I mean, maybe we could upgrade a quarterback. If you're trying to compete this year, that's kind of a key. If you're trying to compete this year, and if you're not, we need to get the age off of our roster. But because I have concerns with Tank Dell, I have concerns with Jackson Smith and Jigba, I have concerns with Jaden Reed. However, Calvin Ridley's in a good spot to produce this year. So is Christian Kirk. Ricky P is not in a good spot to produce this year. So we have some decent pieces. I don't think we need to worry too much about a backup tight end. But Nate, that's just real quick off the rip, looking at this team. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think upgrading your quarterback 2 is probably the priority here. I think, you make a good point where maybe we have a lot of young talent in the wide receiver room, but we don't really have like that stud yet. And maybe Drake London becomes that, but I don't think Drake London's going to be, quite to the level of like the top 8 wide receivers, just production wise, because I don't think that Falcons offense is quite to that level. So, we could use an upgrade there. Maybe that's something like a Tank Dell and a Calvin Ridley together or something like that, because I'm not a big fan of Calvin Ridley. Or maybe I'm not a big fan of Ricky Pearsall either. Jacob Cowing, that's what I've heard. Stash that guy away. But yeah, what can we do to maybe upgrade Geno to somebody? I mean, not like a huge upgrade. We don't need to go out and get like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or something like that. But we both know there's not a ton of safety around Geno Smith right now. He's got Sam Howell behind him, which, we're not too worried about, but long term, don't love where Geno is. So maybe can we upgrade to even Baker Mayfield is a bit more stable than Geno, and probably won't cost you a lot. Or if you want to get younger, can you go up to maybe a Bryce Young, a Bo Nix? Ultimately, could you go get like a Jared Goff? That would be the best move to make, where you're getting a lot of bang for your buck value-wise production. So I think what can we do to upgrade that Geno? And we probably can use one of our wide receivers, either Ridley, Ricky, to pair with Geno.
Yeah, I think that would be my pathway as well. You get to upgrade your productive quarterback 2 now, and then you can kind of have May where hopefully he's starting by the time your starting 2 quarterbacks are missing games due to bye weeks, not injuries. Fingers crossed. But And then I would also look to make an upgrade in that wide receiver room as well. Maybe pairing two of the tight ends, or I'm sorry, two of the wide receivers together, to maybe try to tier up. It's only a start 9, and we have some good depth here to work with. So, Ricky Pearsall is tough to move right now. As much as I'd love to move him,
Yep.
he's a better buy than a sell right now. If you're interested in Ricky Pearsall, I'm not saying, hey, go buy the guy. He's a must buy for anybody. But if you're interested, right now is a good time to buy, a bad time to sell if you're trying to move off of him because of the Ayuk signing. Ricky Pearsall's value is shot for this year because there's just little to no chance he produces. He's going to fall into a nasty bucket of first-round drafted wide receivers that if they don't hit a certain benchmark, they're trash. Look at what happened to JSN last year, and I love JSN as a prospect. I did not like Ricky Pearsall nearly as much as I like JSN as a prospect. So, we have to temper expectations there. But if you can make an upgrade in that wide receiver room as well, I'd like to do so. But yeah, like you said, I don't think we don't have a solid one yet. I think Drake London could be like that, like you mentioned. But I have concerns with Tank, JSN, Reed, and Ricky Pearsall, obviously. So and if we're not looking to compete this year, look at the rest of your league, have some self-awareness and say, hey, is this team competitive compared to the other ones? If not, moving off somebody like Saquon, moving off of Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk even. Mark Andrews can probably hold on to. Maybe. Depends. Let him produce the first few weeks and then sell him at max value. That's what we should do there for sure. So thank you, Griff Giants, our Griff Giants. Apologize. Thank you for the super chat. As a reminder, all super chats get prioritized and guaranteed responses. For moves to make, I spent a bunch of my moves to make on talking with Zach yesterday. So I want to make sure we get to yours, Nate, before we get to any other ones. But here we go. Let's do this one first, quick. Since you're a Ravens fan, Juat Curious. I'm sorry, I had to make. We all make mistakes in our texts, so I just poking some fun, Steven. I'm sorry. Just curious what he thinks about this trade I made this offseason. I traded Fields, AJ Brown, and David Montgomery for Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, as Fields was my starting quarterback, one quarterback format. So we traded Justin Fields, AJ Brown, and David Montgomery for Lamar, Zay Flowers. What are your thoughts, Nate?
I like it. Especially once you mentioned that Fields was your starting quarterback in this league. The upgrade from Fields to Lamar is absolutely worth any kind of downgrade that you would argue from AJ Brown and Montgomery to Zay. I think value-wise this works out. I think for your team this works out as being a really good move because even though quarterbacks are undervalued or less valued in one quarterback scoring formats, having Lamar is a difference maker in a one quarterback league. Having, like a guy like Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, you're just kind of like the quota there. But having Lamar can change the game even in a one quarterback. He's that kind of guy. And like I said, the upgrade from Fields to Lamar, huge. You didn't even have a starting quarterback before this. So this is a great move. I think this is a really good combo to have, a good stack too, because Ravens haven't added to the wide receiver room. Devontae Walker in the 4th round, but Zay is the wide receiver 1 there, and he's going to get plenty of targets. Him and Mark Andrews will thrive.
Yeah, I like this deal a good bit. I feel like we could have maybe gotten a little bit more back on the Lamar Flowers side, but I'm not disappointed with this. This is a long-term. Lamar's locked in for at least, the extent of his contract. We always, it gets thrown out there that mobile quarterbacks don't last as long, whatever the case is. But Lamar is still plenty young, still plenty productive. Zay Flowers, I like a good bit. He's a top 15 wide receiver for me, I think. In my projections, I expect a nice jump up for him. He's an elite company when it comes to first-year target share. He's lumped in with guys like Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, a bunch of just really top-tier wide receivers. So I don't think he's going to hit that mark. I think he's, more going to settle into that Jalen Waddle value versus a Jamar Chase value, obviously. But especially because I think this offense is still a little limited with how much they do passing, especially now with, Lamar still rushing and they bring in Derrick Henry. That tells me they're still looking to run this ball a good bit and be a solid running team, control the clock and all that. But I like this trade overall in a nutshell. I think, as much as I love AJ Brown and productive as I think he's going to be, you get a lot of bang for your buck in this deal. So I like it a good bit. Nathaniel. So with that said, let's talk about your next move here.
My next move to make. All right.
Yes.
All right. Well, I brought like a ton just because I was going to talk a
Oh,
little bit
I
like
love
about a
it.
bunch of different ones. Because
That's
there's a
fine.
lot of good moves to make right before the season. And one guy I actually want to talk about, which works out well right now because we're talking about the Ravens, is Derrick Henry.
Sure.
We got to go get Derrick Henry because this guy is also undervalued in Dynasty. You know, once you're a wide running back that gets past 26, usually you're dead in the
Chop
water.
liver.
Yeah. But Derrick Henry right now, 85 overall in keep trade cut, RB 17. I think this has fallen just a bit too much for a guy that I think could have a top 5 season at the running back position, depending on how the touchdowns go with the Ravens. Lamar is a rushing quarterback. We know that. But Lamar actually never really has a lot of rushing touchdowns. He's not a red zone threat. He's not a guy that runs the ball into the end zone. He gets a ton of rushing yards, but for some reason, the rushing touchdowns don't come. So I think Derrick Henry is going to be that guy. Remember, Gus Edwards had 13 rushing touchdowns last year at one point, led the league in rushing touchdowns. So I think there is a prime opportunity for Derrick Henry to sit here and have 15 touchdowns on the ground this year. I think he has probably the best chance to lead the league in touchdowns, Derrick Henry. So someone I want to go after, I think he can have a top 5 season. And right now, value-wise, pretty acquirable. If you need a running back and you're a contender, you can move a guy like Joe Mixon. I think you're getting a big upgrade at the running back position for production this year. If you go from Joe Mixon to Derrick Henry, there's a lot less mouths to feed on the Ravens offense than there is on the Texans offense. Also, I just trust that offense more as much as I love C.J. Stroud and everyone who's there. Amari Cooper, another guy that you can trade right now for Derrick Henry, which I think you're getting a much better player for your team if you're trading Amari Cooper for Derrick Henry. As much as I love Cooper, and he actually had a career year last year, we have a lot of question marks about Deshaun Watson around here, question marks about the Browns' offenses in general because it all kind of goes around him and his arm, and it does not look good this preseason, didn't look good last year either. And then if you have some tight end depth and you got George Kittle on your team, I would move George Kittle for Derrick Henry as well. I still like George Kittle. I'm not the one who's down on George Kittle. He's 30 years old. He's still on a very productive team. He's coming off not quite a career year, but almost a career year last year. Really good stats last year with Brock Purdy. But I would once again move him for Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry, like I said, is going to have an RB1 season easily, possibly top 5. He's one of the guys that has a shot to be the RB1 this year. The big thing standing in his way is obviously the receiving work, which is not going to go up with the Ravens. So that's going to be the thing that limits him from actually being the RB1 overall. But if that touchdown luck comes in, I think you have a top 5 guy right here. So Derrick Henry, someone that I think is being undervalued because he's an older running back, but he's going to be very productive this year. And I can even talk about Raheem Mostert kind of in the same way. I kind of mentioned him earlier as well. But Raheem Mostert, I know Devon A. Chan is there. I know that Jalen Wright is there, but Mostert's the starting running back still. I know he's like 31, 32 years old, but don't worry about next year. You can get Mostert for a 3rd-round pick right now. You can get Mostert for Cortland Sutton, Josh Palmer, Zach Moss. I mean, Mostert could also have a top 5 season. This is the guy that led the league in rushing touchdowns last year. I don't know if he'll do that again, but he had like 20 rushing touchdowns this year. You give him another 10 this year, and he's going to have a pretty good season. So I think Mostert's also a guy that's undervalued. Those older running backs are undervalued right now until next weekend when they start producing, and then their value's going to go up. You're not going to go to get them for at least an early second before someone moves off of one of those productive guys.
Yeah, that's one thing. I've tried to hammer this offseason is how the lifespan of a dynasty running back works, and honestly any aging player is their value dies off before their production does.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing you can do with that when that happens, when you see that value cliff hit, but we know the production lasts longer, and that's one of the not main issues, but an issue with dynasty mindsets is, man, this guy's old. His value sucks now. You mentioned it earlier that, the dynasty rank needs to not more so reflect the redraft rank, but we need to have that more in mind. So when the value cliff hits, but the production is still going, that's where you can cash in as a competitive roster, buy some of these players cheaply. And that's definitely a move I want to make this week is, if I'm still struggling on any type of running back depth, give me Derrick Henry. I have him as a top 10 running back this year. So there's that. Go ahead.
Bob, there's this timeline. And basically at the end of the season, any running backs over 26, maybe might be a free agent. It might be the obvious, hey, this team's going to be drafting a running back. Like around February, all those running backs drop in value in Dynasty because we don't know what the future looks like. We know they're old. So, hey, they're probably not going to do as well moving forward. But then over the course of the offseason, they get a new contract, their situation gets stabilized, and the value doesn't quite come back up to where it should before the start of the season. And that's where you need to pounce because, Derrick Henry, his value would have dropped off a ton after the season because we know he's probably going to leave the Titans. He's 30 years old. Okay, we're not going to, invest a lot into him. But then he goes to the perfect situation. He gets a 3-year contract, and he hasn't really had a lot of injuries in his career. He's been really good. He was really good last year as well. He's been consistent. So the value should go back up, but it doesn't quite go back up. So that's where you kind of take advantage of that difference. We also have like 2 seasons, obviously, in Dynasty where you have the offseason, you have the season. And the offseason, everyone's Dynasty rankings are based off of startups. During the season, a lot of Dynasty ranks are based off of winning your championship. And you got to find that middle ground between the two throughout the year.
Yeah, no, I like that a good bit, Nate. Great addition. Let's talk some more college ball. Travis Hunter, one of the more interesting names in college ball. Is he a first-round fantasy pick in drafts? If he gets drafted and they decide to put him at wide receiver, what is going on with these shenanigans with Travis Hunter playing both positions? How is this gonna play out, Nate? How does this work? How am I supposed to factor this into my production gradings? Because I don't know.
I wish I could give you a short answer, but I don't. I don't have one. But Travis Hunter is the Ohtani of football right now. And there are some people out there saying, oh, well, he can't do both at the next level. He's going to have to pick one. Travis Hunter has made it pretty clear, I think, so far that he wants to try both. And I think he'll get the opportunity to try both, personally. It's not going to be easy. I don't know if it'll last, but I think he'll get the opportunity. I think that'll be something, we see from him maybe in the draft process where he says, I only want to go to a team where I can do both. I think that's a possibility. And that would be interesting to see how that would play out. But at the end of the day, if he has to choose, while it's harder to find a lockdown corner than it is a productive wide receiver, Travis Hunter looks like a really, really good wide receiver. And I actually just updated my Devy rankings, and I put him in the tier 1 with Luther Burden and McMillan because I think Travis Hunter is that good of a wide receiver. If he can do what he's doing at wide receiver while also playing cornerback every game, imagine what he could do at wide receiver not playing cornerback every game. And if he does have to pick one, I think he picks wide receiver because look at the contracts that these wide receivers are picking. Why would you be a cornerback if you could be a wide receiver? And I've always heard cornerbacks are just guys that couldn't play wide receiver. So Travis Hunter, he wants to show up. He wants to be the wide receiver. He wants to be the guy that people are talking about because, we don't talk about cornerbacks. If you're a good cornerback, we don't talk about you. That means you're doing well. But if you're a wide receiver and you're doing well, we talk about you. I think Travis Hunter is going to be a wide receiver. And in my mind, if we get that guarantee, he's a first-round dynasty pick next year.
I tell you what, if he does try to play both in the NFL level, he will be the 101 in IDP leagues because the points you'd get out of that guy, because little known fact, if any of those IDPers out there, rookie first-round corners, very good for IDP because they're not up to task with the league yet. They get targeted a lot because they're not up to task with the league yet. Usually get a good bit of tackles, maybe some picks in there too. But yeah, I mean, definitely the 101 in IDP leagues if he plays both. But definitely just an interesting conundrum we find ourselves in. That was a talk in the Discord that was happening the other day. So I definitely wanted to bring that up. Thank you for asking that question. If you want to hang out with us in the Discord, patreon.com/nice rewind. There's a link in the description along with a bunch of other ways to support this brand if you are interested in doing so. Further, obviously, it's awesome liking the video, commenting on videos regularly, hanging out with us in these live streams. But if you ever want to go that little bit deeper with us, talk some more, get access to more bonus podcasts. Mike and Nate do a bonus podcast every week. Zach has his bonus podcast. We just released the Hoffcast, one of our Discord moderators and other helpers at hand with our own Hoff. So there's plenty kicking around on there. There also Noah has a bonus podcast as well on weeks that he's not recording with me. So there's a lot going on. Plus, if you're in the gold tier, you get the projections as well. And I
the Goldie chat. Get be a Goldie member.
That's true. That Goldie chat is always popping. You get priority responses, and I aim to kind of upgrade or update projections as we go throughout the season as well. I plan to do like a mid-season, rest of season drop, and that'll be able to highlight maybe some trade targets for you, things like that. I want to try. I don't know how feasible it'll be. I don't know how time consuming it'll be to do like a weekly projections, but I'm not committing to that. I'm going to start looking into it after week 1 and kind of see if it's even possible for me to do, because I'll have a lot going on. We got recordings coming. We got, we're still planning to come at you guys 5 days a week during the season. So it's going to be no breaks for us. To say we just don't take breaks, man. We'll take another break when it's June and July next year. That's when you'll see us take a little bit of a break. We'll drop it down to 3 videos a week. And that's the grind, man. That's what we're here for.
We're here for the next 9 months or something like that.
Yeah.
Before we slow down again.
Yes, craziness. We hope that you're along for the ride. We hope to see you in that Discord. Let's take a question from Brotherhood here. Who do we prefer, Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. or Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk? This is pretty easy for me personally. Which stack do you prefer? I heavily lean Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk at this point. I know Trevor Lawrence has a contract. Brian Thomas Jr. That side is pretty locked in and very stable. But Brock Purdy, somebody's going to pay the guy, and maybe he's not good out of the Shanahan system. I don't know. I won't bank on it, but Brandon Ayuk just got paid. Brock Purdy most likely going to get paid once they sort out all the money situations in San Fran. That's a pretty as close as I think Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy can be in dynasty ranks. Ayuk is well ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. for me. Your thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, same. I prefer Trevor Lawrence over Purdy in a vacuum, but the difference between Ayuk and Brian Thomas Jr., you got to go the Purdy and Ayuk side.
Good deal. Nate, why don't you dive into another move to make that you got for us heading into this week? You said there's a bunch of moves to make out there. Tell me about it.
Got a bunch. I'm just going to run through the ones I brought real quick since we're starting to get to the end here.
Sure.
Jake Ferguson. Go get Jake Ferguson. He's a top 2 target in his offense. That is money for the tight end position in fantasy football. That's where we look for production when someone's a top 2 target. Jake Ferguson's that guy for the Cowboys. This is also a team that passes the ball like crazy. Dak's actually a good quarterback. Don't listen to whatever ESPN tells you otherwise. So Jake Ferguson, you can go get him right now for a 2nd-round pick. Calvin Ridley is someone I would trade for Jake Ferguson. At the wide receiver position, Chris Godwin is someone I want a piece of this year. The Buccaneers offense, Dave Canales, he left, so the people are expecting some regression, but Chris Godwin's moving back into the slot. There's going to be a ton of targets for him there. He's very productive. We've seen him be productive before. I think Baker Mayfield's a pretty good quarterback that can support both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to have top 24 seasons. I think Godwin can be there this year coming out of the slot. You can get him right now for Blake Corum, Brian Robinson, 2 running back side move if you need some wide receiver depth. And then another wide receiver, Bob, that I'm starting to really convince myself is going to have a great year, and that is Romeo Doubs. And you probably can talk a bit more about him, but the camp hype has been really building that he is the wide receiver 1 there. He could lead the team in targets once again because, Christian Watson, I don't believe in his consistency with his health. So Romeo Doubs, that is the guy that I think you want over there. Of course, I love Jaden Reed still, and I still would love to take a flyer on Dontavian Wicks, but I think Romeo Doubs is going to be the guy this year. I'm excited to see what he can do. And you can move right now Jalen Warren, Chase Brown for Romeo Doubs, who I think, you're going to be putting in your flex spot and be pretty happy with.
Yeah, I don't hate it. We'll get back to that in a little bit. But David chiming in here with the super chat. I appreciate the heck out of you. Rebuilding 12-team super flex. We have Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy. Should we hold J.J. McCarthy and tank or trade him away? Zach and I actually talked about this right after the injury and our moves to make, or maybe a grading trades video now that I think about it. But either way, we talked about this a little bit. For a good week, he was the 2nd most traded player after the injury, which I see a side to trading him or moving off of him. And the side for me that makes sense is if I was expecting him at some point this season to be my wide receiver 3, but now I need, or my quarterback 3, excuse me. I don't expect him to take many wide receiver reps.
Man, he's going to be running routes out there.
Travis Hunter of 2 different positions, but either way,
he's in competition with Jalen Naylor.
Yeah, I take J.J. McCarthy in that one. That is a Jalen Naylor slide for sure. But there's an aspect or a world that makes sense for trading away J.J. McCarthy. And it's, to me, in the instance of trading him to get something more competitive for your team now. I've been a record in the past saying this. I just don't feel like there's a lot of value when I'm trying to be competitive in just having players take up space. That, yes, I like J.J. McCarthy. I think he's a talented quarterback. I think he's going to do good things in the league. But as much as I like him, I'd much rather like somebody who's healthy, putting up points into my lineup, or can put points in my lineup. If you're going to trade him away, be productive with the trade. Don't just trade him away for a first round pick. That was one of the most common trades we saw, was trading him away for a first round pick in 2025. And that just does nothing for me, because I'd spend a 25 first to go get JJ McCarthy as long as it wasn't projected to be
You need to
top
make
3,
sure, like,
top
if you're
5 or something.
trading away JJ McCarthy for a first, like, you need to be totally sure that's gonna be like a top 3, top 4 pick.
Yeah, exactly. Which you can kind of bank on, because that team that's buying him is not getting any better.
It's true.
But either way, I don't want to, because you have this quarterback who, and the reason why I like sending a 25 first for him possibly is the idea of, I'm kind of using that 25 first to draft a better quarterback than I think we're going to have in that draft class, because that's one of the big question marks we have already with that class, is how good the class is. I'm probably holding in a rebuild. I don't see a lot of great reasons to move him unless you're getting him into a deal that gets you like a good wide receiver or a very good tight end. Like, does it get you in a conversation for like a Dalton Kincaid or a Trey McBride or some tight end that's going to be around for a while too? Does it get you into conversations like that, or other wide receivers of, top 15 ilk? Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave is pretty high pick, but yeah, and I don't love combining assets and divulging up depending on the start size. If it's start 8, sure, go ahead and consolidate a little bit, but otherwise I'd probably just hold and just keep it as simple as that and just chill with that. Any other additional thoughts, Nate?
Nope, not on this trade. But Thomas over there is talking about joining the Discord, saying something about having to download something in the Play Store. You have to join through our Patreon. Make sure you go to Patreon, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. From there, you sign / you sign up. You'll be given the code to join. You'll be given the link to join the Discord. From there, it's not different than any other Discords, but it is private, so you do have to join that way.
Yeah. So how it works is you basically sign up on Patreon, and with your Patreon account, if it's linked to your Discord account, so you'll need the 2 accounts to make it happen. I don't know if you need like the app for Patreon, but either way, you'll need to sign up on Patreon and have that link to your Discord, and then since it integrates, and that's how we kind of keep it fluid with who all should be there and who all should not be there. That's just one of those things that is how that works. So if you want to reach out, you should be able to message the Patreon page. I can send over a link that kind of walks through how to integrate everything to make that a little smoother, because I know it's a little, iffy for how that works. It's just kind of, one of those things, if you're not super used to integrations and stuff with apps, it can be a headache, but it's not too bad once you have something telling you how to do it and not having to try to fumble through it yourself. I know I had that issue when I tried to link my Discord as well. But also, Thomas, you talked about trading for Dontavian Wicks this offseason, Nate. And getting back to this Packers, before we get out of this, let's talk about the Packers wide receiver room a little bit. And I'm very much leaning towards it's going to be a 1A, 1B with Dobbs and Jaden Reed, because as much as Romeo Dobbs has been the Devin Singletary of the wide receiver position for the Packers, just will not go away. As much as we, day 3 pick was okay, had some good flashes his rookie year, has continued to be like the top receiving target percentage wise for that offense over the last couple of years. And as exciting as Christian Watson is, as much as I love Jaden Reed, I think is, and you have to factor in values to this, Jaden Reed is like the safe, going to happen, solid. He's going to be involved in this offense one way or another. They spent a 2nd round pick on the guy. He's shown explosiveness. He's shown he can be a top target getter in the red zone, which is huge.
Yeah.
That's nothing to scoff at. So I think you're going to see a 1A, 1B type production scenario with those two. And with Dontavian Wicks, honestly, as much as I like the guy, unless Christian Watson is just moved on from either via trade or they say, dude, your hamstrings are whack, go take a seat on the bench, warm those puppies up, warm up the bench, go take a seat. I struggle seeing Wicks getting really involved without that, at least to a point of being fantasy relevant. As a Packers fan, I'm going to love it because I think he's going to be out there. I think he's going to make some clutch plays. But I really struggle seeing a consistent path to fantasy production. And that sometimes, there's just too many mouths to feed, as it's not a great wide receiver room. It's just a very complete wide receiver room. We have good depth and things of that sort. So I struggle from the fantasy aspects of it. Like, I get it because Wicks' college profile is kind of iffy in terms of, like, I think he was a sleeper because he had one really good year. I think it was his junior year Then they had the COVID year. Then he had an injury, something along the way. And then his final college season was trash because his quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, and I've made this joke before, but I'm going to make it again, more like Brennan Arm Week, was not a good quarterback. Good burn. Watch out, Brennan Armstrong. But he was great the year before, and then he just decided he doesn't like Dontavian Wicks or playing good football anymore. But so Wicks is definitely an interesting name. I like having him on the NFL roster because I think he's done good things so far, but I struggle from a fantasy perspective with Christian Watson still being involved. But we can't rely on the hamstring, so who knows? But any additional thoughts on Wicks or any of the Packers?
Yeah, I pulled up Dontavian Wicks from the trade database with Dynasty Daddy just to see like what his going rate is. And there's a couple trades for a second round pick for Wicks. I would not do that. I would love to move Wicks for a second round pick.
Yeah.
But there's also some trades for some third round picks for Dontavian Wicks. I don't mind that as much. If you want to take a flyer on a guy, like there's one here, it's a 2027 third round pick. If you can go get Dontavian Wicks for a 2027 third round pick, I'm okay with that. You take your chances there. I would not pay a second. I would love to move him for a second. I see a couple seconds and thirds. I would also move him for a second and a third, obviously, if I'd move him for a second. But I would not be paying those prices. I mean, here's a straight up Dontavian Wicks for Deontay Johnson. Like, what are we doing here? So if you have Wicks and you can get that kind of value where that second round value, I would move him. But if you can also acquire him for a third, I would consider that as well. I think he's one of those guys you can go either way, just depending on the value. Also, I see like a trade here for Baker Mayfield for Wicks straight up. If you can go get your quarterback 3 with Wicks, absolutely go do that. Pat Fryermuth, another guy I'd probably move Wicks for, especially if you're tight end.
There's some decent enough value out there, but it's tough to consider it at those costs because it is just a little too much for me to be interested, and therefore, sometimes I think we need to really, as exciting as players can be and as fun as he was in the playoffs, and that's something we've talked about too with players in the playoffs, getting, they're under the big spotlight. Everybody sees what's going on in a playoff game. But not everybody will see what's going on a normal average Sunday. So you get these players that just get a little inflated. One of the last players you saw, whatever the case is. And I think just realistically, there's not enough happening here for me to really get excited about Wicks. But with that said, I'll give you guys one of my favorite teams we have on this channel. But we are going to get the heck out of here. We hope this helps you guys get ready for the offseason. If you have more questions wanting to get ready for the offseason, we talked about it, patreon.com/Nice Rewind. The Discord is going to be off the hook the next week or so. And throughout the season, it is a madhouse throughout the entire season when you're talking just what's going on in game day. Oh, this player, that player, whatever crazy play. Did you guys see what happened in the Bears game? Hey, we're getting hyped about Bears games over here, and you will be too if you're a Bears fan, or maybe you have Roma Dunze, maybe you have DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, whoever. But we hope to see you there. We hope to see you guys for the rest of the season as well. We hope you guys enjoy the offseason. This is kind of our goodbye to the offseason. As much as we loved you, it was real, it was fun, but I can't say it was real fun, or at least not as much fun as the regular season is and will be. But everybody out there, I hope you guys are liking the video, commenting on all the videos, and enjoying everything we put out for you guys. I hope you guys are ready for a locked-in, exciting, pumped-up season. With all that said, we are going to get the heck on out of here. So I will see you guys in the next one. We will see you guys in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.